This episode of Linux Action Show is brought to you by GoDaddy.com.
And by Ting.com. Head over to last.ting.com and save $25 off your first device.
And welcome to the Linux Action Show. My name is Chris.
My name is Matt.
And this is Season 26, Episode 6. Hey, Matt, good morning to you.
Good morning. Good Sunday. Good all that stuff.
I know, right? Should I tell the folks what we have coming up today?
What do we got?
Big show today, Matt. Big show. All right, so not only are we going to bust through the news like we always do, and we've picked out a few of the great stories from this week, but after that, we're going to introduce a new segment, /Etsy, and we're going to cover SSH Tunnels and SSH Tunnels versus VPNs and when you might want to use which and give you an introduction to that.
Nice.
So stay tuned for that. And then in the second half of the show, we're going to come clean. We're going to be honest and tell you why it is that after we sit down here and record the world's largest and most awesome Linux podcast, we go back and edit on a Hackintosh.
What? It's like pulling off a scam.
It is ridiculous. And we're going to just go through and kind of identify some of the areas that still remain weak for Linux, especially in the media production space. Now, of course, Linux has had some incredible gains in the last few years, and there's a lot of things it's very good at now. But I'm going to make the case as to why maybe it's not so good still for for professional video editors, and maybe identify some of the areas where I see some of that improving, but there's also some areas where I don't see any improvement at all for years.
Right.
So we'll cover that.
Okay.
And then, of course, we'll get to the feedback and all that good jazz we have in the latter half of the show. But first, Matt, it is our picks. Are you ready?
I'm ready. Let's hear it.
Let's start with the Runs Linux. This pick, I love just being able to say this. An upgraded aquatic robot server rack at sea runs Linux.
Oh, wow. That sounds kind of cool.
It is.
I like that.
It is a floating 8U server rack. So, of course, we're seeing in this image here, we're seeing the tip of the iceberg. Below it is equipment that is waterproof. It runs Linux. It has a Java software stack on there. You can fit up to 8U worth of equipment. And the CTO and inventor of what's called the Wave Glider was quoted as saying, with computational power and the ability to tirelessly swim across vast oceans, because it's got solar power.
Right, okay.
The Wave Glider SV3 represents a big step forward in the state-of-the-art of unmanned monitoring and exploration.
Interesting.
You got drones at sea, and you got drones in the air now, Matt.
That's just spooky.
So think about, like, the first thing I thought of is now the connectivity. Now we need to come up with, like, internet connectivity via water, and then the Pirate Bay could just move out to the sea.
Yeah, I was just about to say, I'm surprised they don't have these things on order, right? Because, I mean, you know, yeah, if they can come up with a way to totally network that, like, through water.
I like Shane Qful in the chat room says, well, wait a minute, wouldn't heat be an issue? Now, they didn't go into details on cooling, but I wonder if it could use seawater in a way to, like, pump, you know, sort of like a water cooling system that meets Earth. I don't know.
It would theoretically not be impossible.
Although you got to wonder if salt water would be.
Yeah, I mean, there would have to be either filtration in place, or it would have to just have an existing water system somewhere. Yeah. But that's cool. That's very cool.
Speaking of which, you can always join the Linux Action Show live Sundays, 10 a.m. Pacific, over at jblive.tv, and you can hang out in our live chat room and tell us what's going on. Of course, that's also 1 p.m. over in New York and 6 p.m. over in London. So
crazy time zones.
Just do your own math. You can base it off one of those. So, yeah, check it out. We'll have a link to the upgraded aquatic robot that runs Linux if you want to read that.
Oh, that's cool. That is so awesome.
When I saw that, it was submitted to the subreddit, too. And one of the versions that I saw this week had a few more pictures where you could actually get a little better idea of the undercarriage of this.
Yeah, I didn't hear about it until it got in the show. It was in the show notes yesterday. I was just like, what?
Well, what I love about it is, like, when you look at it just as it's floating, it just looks like a surfboard with solar panels on top of it.
That's so crazy.
You wouldn't even know there's 8U worth of gear in there.
No kidding, right?
That's pretty wild.
That's so cool, though.
Way of the future, Matt. Way of the future. Speaking of Way of the Future, I want to tell you about our sponsor this week, GoDaddy.com. GoDaddy.com. Love the GoDaddy.com. And, of course, you know, whoa, don't look at that. What are you doing, chat room? Look at that. Gosh, that chat room.
Come on, guys.
Now, I often talk to Danica before shows. Didn't get a chance to talk to her this weekend because I was playing some video games last night. Boy, did that upset her. So, to make things up, because I am in the doghouse, and let me tell you, this is not a doghouse you want to be in.
No.
This girl's a little scary. Just saying. I love you, Danica.
Jones a race car.
I love you, Danica. But she could drive over here super fast and kick my ass. So, it's I just got to be cognizant of that. So, you guys, maybe you could help me get back in the good graces of Danica. Use the code Linux295 when you check out over at GoDaddy.com. Linux295 will get you a .com for $2.95. Additional .coms after that, only $9. That's still a great deal.
An awesome deal.
But you know what, Matt? Maybe you already got yourself a .com.
I do have a few of those. Actually, I got a number of them.
Yeah, actually, I do too. But you know what? There is no such thing as too many .coms.
This is true.
It's like there's no such thing as too much Danica. But maybe you are one of those people that thinks otherwise. Use the code GO35OFF3. GO35OFF3 saves you 35%. GO35 off 3. 35% off whatever you're getting when it's a new order over at GoDaddy.com. So we got 2 codes for you that are just fantastic deals. Linux $2.95, get your .com for $2.95, and of course GO35 off 3 to get 35% off. You know, GoDaddy is a longtime sponsor of the Linux Action Show. They're here because they want to reach the Linux audience. Right? I think that speaks volumes. So go over there and support GoDaddy and support this show. And thank you to GoDaddy. And don't forget to visit those links in our show notes just to let them know you're paying attention. All right, Matt, should we jump over to the Android pick?
Oh, yeah, I'm looking forward to this.
Now, this
is so cool.
It's very germain, as fancy people say. Now, I don't know if I'm one of those people, but it's called SSH Tunnel. And you might have guessed by our Etsy segment this week, it's going to be a little relevant to what you're doing. And on your Android device, it lets you create what is essentially a secure connection from your device to another device that runs an SSH server.
And I love the illustration they provided. I mean, while it seems a little simplistic and drawn, it's very clear.
Yeah, it is, right?
Right.
And so this is a way you could access. So you could be on a coffee shop Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
You could and you could tunnel your POP3 connection, your IMAP connection through this, or maybe you just want to get access to some home resources. This will just be a way to stream media that you have stored on your home server. There's all kinds of things you could do if you can create a secure on-demand tunnel through SSH to a machine you want. Now, this app works without root, but it does have some advanced features if you have root on your phone. So I like that.
So it goes either way. That's cool.
It's by root. It doesn't matter. It's you got it or you don't, or it's binary root, or whatever whatever you want to say. Nice. And what's really cool about it is it lets you just create a little persistent tunnel in the background. It puts a little notification in the drop down. You can toggle it on, toggle it off. Yeah. So it's SSH Tunnel, and it's absolutely free.
It's real straightforward, great GUI. Yeah, very, very happy with that. Yeah, looks good.
And of course, Matt, to complement our Android pick this week, we also have one for the Linux desktop. It's called GNOME SSH Tunnel Manager.
I love this app. Yeah, I love this app.
In fact, you know what? I'll just load it because I have it.
Yeah, and it's like it's one of those apps where it's just like, why have I not been using this for?
Yeah,
ever?
it's super easy.
Wow.
Although I don't see the icon working in the Unity, unless that's
that's not it.
This is definitely not. This is solitaire, Matt.
This is solitaire.
How did I search for? Okay, so GNOME. All right, well, watch. Let's just do this live. GNOME SSH. Oh, now
it's going to work for you. I see.
Pretty brutal though. That's pretty brutal. I got to be honest. Yeah. That didn't work. That's
still not it. Well, geez, guys. Okay, do you got Synapses running?
This is not a. This is not supposed to be a Unity review, Matt. But
yeah, I'm just going to turn it into one.
I'm just going to go out on a limb here and say,
KDE, Chris, KDE.
Yeah. Well, maybe I won't give a live demo of it. That's kind of funny.
What's going on?
I'll have it. You know what? I don't need to. You know why I don't need to? Because I'll give it to you in the Etsy segment.
Yeah.
So we'll just cover it there. So here it is. GNOME SSH Tunnel Manager. It's obviously an open source app, GTK based obviously on the name GNOME, and it is a very, very easy UI to create and turn on and turn off SSH tunnels to use keys. Yeah. It can put a little menu option up in
which is really nice. Nice integration, easy to set up. It's just brain dead.
Just a simple front end to manage SSH tunnels, and it stores the tunnel configuration in simple XML format, so you can just move that between machines. I like that a lot too. I just drop it in my Dropbox, and Bob's your uncle. So we'll have links to both of those in the show notes.
Checking out.
Yeah, and they'll be relevant to your interest when we get to our new segment later in the show this week.
Exactly.
Matt.
Yes.
Now we have busted through this first segment like nobody's business, so we have a little bit of extra time for me to mention something.
Okay.
Because we have been on a roll, and I'm really excited about a new show that launched this last week on Jupiter Broadcasting. Now, you guys have been watching the show for a little while, and maybe the other shows. You've seen this bleed into all of the shows. I am very excited about Bitcoin, and I've started a new show called Plan B. It's for the practical Bitcoin enthusiasts, covering the technology around Bitcoin, covering some of the other cryptocurrencies. We're not necessarily limiting ourselves just to Bitcoin. It's called Plan B, and the first episode, our beta episode, went out on Wednesday, and we'll have new episodes every Tuesday over at jupiterbroadcasting.com. If you're curious about cryptocurrencies, or what the hell is going on with Bitcoin right now, because it's crazy, it's up, it's down, and
well, it's real informative in the intro. Oh man,
thank you.
The intro is really good.
Spend some time on that intro. And this show is where I feel like we're launching it at the perfect time. We've gotten a fantastic response to this, and there's a lot of questions around what the hell is Bitcoin, what are its weaknesses, what are its strengths, is it actually practical, or is it just all hype? We talk
exactly.
We
Because
cover
now
all
the
that.
time to get in. Shall I be looking at an alternative? I mean, it really answers important questions.
Yeah. And the topic of Litecoin has come up recently. We covered that in this week's show. So go over Jupiter Broadcasting, check out Plan B, and then check out for new episodes every single week. Pretty exciting.
Get
All right,
subscribed.
man. Well, I think that's all our picks. So you know what that means. It's time for the news.
Hey, it's time for the news, and this episode is brought to you by
Ting.com.
Yes.
That's right. Ting is mobile that makes sense. I'm a happy Ting customer. And you know, Matt, I got an email from a viewer. He might be in the chat room right now, actually.
I bet he is.
Incomon.
I bet he is.
Imacon, I think is maybe how he says it, with a K, not with a C.
Sure.
And he emailed me and said, hey, I just signed up for Ting.com, and I freaking love the Ting.com dashboard. Now, we've talked about this a little bit, but he said it was so easy for me to just go look at there in real time and see that, hey, you know what? Turns out I was using a little more text messages than I expected. I just logged into my Ting dashboard, and I was able to see immediately that, you know what, I need to actually up my text a little bit. And the great thing about Ting is you just go over to Ting and you can mix and match your plans. And so he had 100 text messages. For $5, he goes to 1,000 text messages. He just adjusts it. Nice. There's no hidden fees, and there's no overages. So if he does go over, he doesn't have to worry, because if you use more than you thought you would, you just pay only for what you use. And it also goes the other way. If you don't use what you thought you were going to use, Ting credits you on the unused service. If you use less than you thought, Ting drops you down to the next level and hits you with the difference on your next bill.
And I love the fact that the dashboard allows you to make these decisions without a lot of guesstimating. I mean, you have hard numbers to make hard decisions.
Well, and actually, Ting just made it even better, Matt. Check this out, because this is a real good example of how Ting just freaking gets it. They just released a mobile app for Android, the Ting mobile app, where you can manage your account. It lets you see at a glance in near real time. You can view your bills. You can get a complete call and text and data history. You can enable services on your account, which is awesome, through the app. So think about it. You're on a phone. You're like, you know what? I want more data. You log into the Ting app. You can see where your data usage is at. You can turn up services, turn down services, manage different things.
And it's also laid out just real nice, simple, clean interface. I love that.
This is what I'm talking about. You got a company here who's super smart. These are the guys behind Two Cows who started out and said, we're going to shake up the mobile industry and we're going to do it right. And they're embracing Android like nobody's business. They're shaking up the industry so much that you're seeing some of the bigger players try to respond in some semi-competitive ways, but they can't touch what Ting.com offers. Tell you what, go over to Ting.com, go to last.ting.com, save $25 off your first device, or if you're bringing your own device like I did with my Evo, they'll just credit your account. Last.ting.com, and even if you're just going to check them out, let them know that you appreciate them supporting the show. Absolutely. Or if you want to grab service, $25 off your first month. And when you look at their rates, like my monthly rate is like $33. So when you add a $25 credit, that basically covers the entire
data
thing.
too, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, that's
a gig with unlimited tethering and hotspotting.
Ooh.
Well, until I use up the money, but until I use up my megabytes. But there's like, I don't have to pay, like, I was just looking at
and then you can just adjust later on. So
one of the I won't say their name, but one of the big guys out there.
Yep.
$35 just to get 5 gigabytes of tethering.
Yep.
Ridiculous, right?
Yes.
I'm getting 1,000 on my phone, and that's tethering, hotspotting, everything's just included. Love it.
And for our audience, that's really what they want. They want the data.
Yes.
The data.
So thanks to Ting.com for sponsoring this week's episode of Linux Action Show, last.ting.com. Thanks, guys.
Yes.
All right, so speaking of things we really want, we want improved NVIDIA drivers. And we all remember Linus giving NVIDIA the middle finger.
One finger salute.
And you know what? That middle finger seems to have moved.
It became iconic. I mean, not only were T-shirts actually made of this, from what I've seen, but it actually got their butts in gear.
They also, somebody did the Barack Obama Hope poster. You know, hope for better drivers.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that is awesome. So guess what? NVIDIA has delivered. NVIDIA has a new Linux driver, which includes Optimus support. Which is the multiple video card.
We're not talking this Bumblebee stuff. We're talking true Optimus support.
And RanderR 1.4 support. So here it is. Nice. NVIDIA Optimus, while it's actually not even obvious from NVIDIA's changelog, one of the items notes, added initial support for RanderR 1.4, provides objects with secure output capability, which can be used to render the desktop on NVIDIA GPUs and display it on output connected to a provider with the Slink output capability, such as an Intel integrated graphics device or a DisplayLink USB to VGA adapter. That is NVIDIA's way of saying Optimus support has been introduced with the new NVIDIA driver. They were a little tacit on how they wanted to say it.
Yeah, they were a little.
They're like,
That's kind.
whatever. We got
That's
to it.
kind.
We got to it. Now, I wasn't able to parse from this. Remember, we talked about the sort of controversial changes they wanted to make to the kernel code.
Yes.
And I couldn't really find if this was part of that. But
yeah, it kind of bounced around a little bit. But
just FYI for our audience, there's also a special xorg.conf setup required still to take advantage of the new Optimus support. And there's one other gotcha too. It's an implementation. There's no synchronization currently performed between the two devices, so you can sometimes see tearing on the screen, which may happen after a render is offloaded.
So maybe we should label this kind of a early stages alpha beta kind of thing, maybe. Yeah.
And there's also no clear word on how the power management of the GPU that gets deactivated during that time is. But
it's early, but it's happening. It's in process, and that's exciting.
I would say if you don't desperately need Optimus, it might not be worth it just yet. Because remember, not only is this beta, but Phoronix, as they love to do, has posted a benchmark of the new GPU driver.
Oh, right on.
And you know what? All in all, nothing too astonishing, differential. But you see, this one here is the new driver. It's just barely.
It's squeaking ahead.
Yeah, and even in here, and actually in this one,
it kind of lagged just a touch,
a little bit.
So it sounds like it's a little early. Definitely a little early.
In some use case scenarios, it's actually behind.
Sure.
In some, it's ahead. Actually, only in one is it ahead. But, it's beta, and they'll continue to refine it.
Yeah. I think it's something we definitely need to watch and kind of track and test out every once in a while, see how it's coming along. Sure.
And there's already, I think, a PPA available for Ubuntu, and I'm sure it'll be out in other distros.
Super.
One last NVIDIA story before we move on.
Okay.
Some good news for the Tegra chipset, which is obviously
that's
huge
where it's at.
In mobile. A series of code updates released by developers from Avionics Design, which is not actually NVIDIA, but a partner of NVIDIA, which I think is interesting. This Tegra code, it kind of shows you the difficulties here, where a lot of times these vendors don't have direct control over their own product's driver code. So that's one of the reasons it's sometimes a barrier to open sourcing. So here NVIDIA's worked with their partner, Avionics Design. They've released the code update, which will allow drivers for Linux systems running on the Tegra system to take advantages of NVIDIA's 3D capabilities in the Tegra chips.
Nicely done.
Yeah. It's a small series of patches. There's a few more code patches that need to be merged, but overall, Matt.
Hey,
man. This is really mobile is big.
That's exciting. I mean, I'm really impressed to see NVIDIA actually taking these steps. And a lot of people are going to hate on them because it's not there yet. Give them some time. They're getting there. They're moving. Linus's finger has spoken. It's happening.
Speaking of things that are getting there and moving, Arch. Now,
yes,
Arch and GNOME. Seems like two great things that would just go wonderful together.
Peanut butter and chocolate.
And it's happening. GNOME 3.8 is ready for testing on Arch. But one of the things we wanted to do here on the big show was do a GNOME 3.8 review. And we kind of ran into this. There's a lot of different ways you can do it scenario, but none of them are that great.
True.
And that used to be Ubuntu's thing. Ubuntu was synced to GNOME releases. You'd have a new version of GNOME that hit.
Right.
That was the thing. Right?
That was kind of the deal, right? I mean, yeah.
That was what a great thing about Hardy and Warty Warthog and all of those things is they were the best.
And for most people, that worked for them. Certainly.
And since the sort of split between the distro and the GNOME, there really hasn't been quite anything that's like this presentation platform for GNOME, and I suppose that's why they've talked about GNOME OS. So according to the Arch Dev public mailing list, GNOME 3.8 is ready to be moved into the testing repo. And here's the other thing. They might end up dropping Cinnamon from the repos.
Really?
Yeah.
Now, that's going to be... that's going to have some effects on some related distributions.
Like CineArch, for example, right? I mean, you got to figure, since they're based on Arch and they're running Cinnamon. So an announcement has come from the CineArch project. They are dropping Cinnamon in favor of GNOME. They think that Cinnamon packages based on GNOME 3.6 code and earlier are just way too far behind the upstream GNOME packages available in repositories. In their announcement, the developers state that it's almost impossible to maintain software developed by Linux Mint in a rolling release. According to them, the Cinnamon project, the upstream Cinnamon project, is 1 year behind other upstream code. CineArch will now switch to using the current version of GNOME by default when the GNOME 3.8 packages arrive in the Arch Extra repository.
Interesting.
Here's what I say. Brilliant move, because first of all, the Arch Extra repository tends to get packages before most other distros, not all, but most, and we need a showcase distro for GNOME. Now, I know, here's the #1 comment we'll get from this story. Why do you need to use a derivative distribution when you could just use Arch itself? Matt, will you please go smack those people in the mouth? Will you?
Well, and I'll be your poster child example of it. It's not for a lack of inability. It's for a lack of I'm not, and we'll just label me as lazy. I'm not willing to invest the time to make that happen. At a stage in my life to where I need to be able to plug something in and just have it work. I know people really enjoy configuring their distributions, and that's awesome. And one time in my life when I was single, that I used to do that too. But I'm not there anymore. So having a distribution that just does it for me, you know. I'm there.
And if I just want to try out GNOME, I want to see what it's capable of, and if I want to recommend GNOME to earlier newbier users, I want to be able to just hand them an ISO or hand them a USB stick and say, here, man, try this out, see what you think.
Right. You don't want to freak them out. Arch is something that it's like a fine wine. It ages better with time, but so does the experience it takes to get to a point where you're really ready to do that.
Now, what do you think about Fatal Error in the IRC chat room says, this is just another reason why I can't stand Arch anymore. They change too often. It's such a hobbyist distro.
I disagree. Even so, I'm not an Arch guy. I would actually stick up for them in that you know what you're getting into. This is what they provide. This is, in fact, their advantage over other distributions is that this is a distribution that is always going to be bleeding edge, and that's what people want. Not for myself, but others.
Yeah, I feel I fit into that category. I've gotten to the point now where I'm running right here. This is the this here is the 1304. Ubuntu beta, and I like the fact that every single day app get updates.
Yeah, I love. Yeah,
I love fresh code. I always love to. So for me, Arch is a great solution. However, I'm in that category where when I need to load a distro, I have roughly 25 minutes that I can assign to that task.
Exactly.
And I'm not even a full half hour. Not even because there is just no way, unless I'm doing it like at 11 o'clock at night when nobody's awake in the house and I'm dead tired. And so but I want to play with Arch and I want to play with GNOME. You know what? If I ever got to a point where I took 2 weeks off from shows and I had nothing to do, I would reload.
Well, then you could really just get down into it, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. So and I don't want GNOME OS. I want mainline Linux and I want Arch. And I think this is a brilliant move by the Synapse Arch project. They're going to have to change their name.
Yeah,
Noma Arch.
Noma Arch. I was going to say, Noma Arch. That could work. Sure.
There you go. The chat room is pointing out. Riley says that it's not like eventually you won't be able to still find cinnamon in the Arch.
Yeah, I mean it's not that, it's just a name change and just a kind of a change of focus. It's not that big a deal.
Snickers in the chat room says Gnarch.
Gnarch. I like that. I like Gnarch. Gnarch is good.
Webby Wizard warns me though that the Synapse Arch installer takes more than 25 minutes. I'm out. I'm out. Can't handle it. No, I mean I exaggerate the point to illustrate the point that
it still streamlines a little. So.
It's important, I think.
Sure. Especially if you're showing other folks.
So, this is probably the story of the week that excited me the most, I think. And it's actually not a brand new proposal. It's been floating around, at least I saw it first float around mid 2012. So it's not totally brand new. Right. It's called I think Clyde. Clyde is a new lightweight KDE project that's been started. KLYDE.
Okay.
And it's coming out of from efforts from the OpenSUSE camp. In fact, it started during week 9, Hack Week 9 at SUSE. You know, SUSE does these Hack Weeks.
Oh, I love that.
Here's the goals, and then we'll cover a little bit more. So Clyde is meant to have a minimal footprint. The first method of attacking this is by packaging. It involves factoring optimal components for the KDE desktop out of the base installation into sub-packages that the main packages let me skip ahead here because that's just getting down to the wood.
Sure.
The actual KDE build includes everything. The optional components are always available, so those who need them can just add the package and start using it. So it's not like they're taking KDE and forking it. So it's not
a fork. Okay.
They're not saying it's not like the Cinnamon Project looked at GNOME Shell and said, "Nah, we're going to do our own thing." They're not doing that. They're taking mainline KDE and shimming it down. Right. The second approach then is they're going to go attack the configuration aspect of it. Here's what they say: they're thinking of allowing different profiles of the KDE desktop with a little menu that comes up, and you just as the user will choose the profile, and it will
select that.
It would put KDE into that mode.
Sure.
They're not exactly sure how they would do that yet, but they were thinking maybe one way ship with a set of defaults, and then people could choose with a wizard.
And that's a nice way of doing it. Again, people that are especially new to things are like, oh yeah, I can do that.
Now, Matt, you've been hanging out in KDE recently, so tell me what you think about this aspect of it.
Okay.
Another thing they want to do is they want to take it and they want to do a simplified configuration presets with fewer choices and therefore easier to understand. They feel it also makes the desktop feel faster and more lightweight because people equate visual simplicity with efficiency.
I would think that would be an awesome option because, I mean, there are people out there that do want that kind of functionality, and I would say that would definitely give the impression of it feeling faster for sure.
And one other thing is they say the packaging effort's actually already done. They're using the OpenSUSE, the Open Build service, so they're just able to toss that in there. And I have a video linked in the show notes where the guy behind this, Stefferson English from KDE and OpenSUSE, he gave a presentation on this back in November 2012 of Clyde and kind of what his goals are. So it's about a 30-minute video, and I'll include this in the show notes if you guys want to check it out. Yeah. And also, I think a lot of people will say, well, hey, what about things like Razer QT? And TDE, and there's a few others out there. These are all, like, for example, I think Razer QT is one of the further along lightweight
mature.
QT. Yeah, exactly. It's a QT based desktop. Looks, smells like KDE, walks like KDE, but is a little bit more leaner. See, this is a little closer to more what Cinnamon is, I think.
It actually, I was going to say, it feels a lot like Cinnamon in many aspects.
Yeah,
I mean, there are definite differences, but
I think it's still more compatible than. But I think that what Clyde is attempting to do is take the KDE we all know and love and just whittle it down a little bit. Right? And then still give you something that if it's completely compatible, it's still completely of the same breed, it's just the supermodel version of the desktop.
Exactly. Yeah,
it's a performance sports car.
Nice refinements that just kind of trim down some of the excess.
It could make Clyde could be like the sweet spot. It could. They could end up making the sweet spot of a KDE desktop. The power. I mean, KDE is so well integrated, and the back end of KDE is like this under celebrated, amazing plumbing system that's there.
Yeah.
All
of
really this, and KWin is awesome. And QT is obviously the way of the future. So to have a really great, fast, lightweight desktop based on top of that
would really go a long way for them, and it's going to allow them to penetrate just a little bit more market too. That'll be awesome.
I love penetrating markets, man.
I love penetration. All right.
We talked about this last week. The LucasArts shut down, and then they were releasing like the Jedi Outcast,
which is kind of a double-edged sword.
So, little update on that. So the code's out, and we saw there was somebody linked in the Linux Action Show subreddit over at linuxactionshow.reddit.com. A Google Plus post from this guy,
this fella. We're not going to try and butcher that name, but yeah.
Oh, come on, let's give it a go. Let's give it a go. Come on. I'm going to say.
Okay. Leopold's last name. I have that.
Okay. Jokin?
I'm so sorry.
All right.
I'm so sorry.
Hey, see,
we're trying.
Hopefully, this isn't
American educational system. What do you want?
This is tradition on the show. We got to butcher everybody.
Absolutely.
If I hadn't grown up with my name, I'd butcher it. So he says 5 days into working on Jedi Outcast Linux support, he's finally in the game.
Nice.
There's still some major issues. Loading and saving is not working correctly, and there's some AI problems, and sound cues are sometimes a little early.
Okay, but there's work on it. That's cool. And it looks good.
There it is running in Linux.
Now, like he's got a little windowed action there.
Advantage here is it's based on, I believe, the Quake 3 engine. So there's a ton of stuff you can leverage there.
That's going to help.
Now, just a reminder, the game is going to be open source, and the engine's going to be open source. The assets are not, I don't believe. So you're still going to have to get the assets.
Okay. That's going to make it interesting, but
there's a few other games out there like that.
Yeah.
I'm very excited that we already, last week we announced it. This week we're talking about it already running.
Yes.
I mean, come on.
That's really fast.
That's not too bad.
That's quite quick.
Not too bad. All right, Matt. Well,
cool.
There you go. Just a quick news week, but that's okay because we've got a brand new segment called Slash Etsy, and it's up right now. Coming up in this segment of Slash Etsy, I'm going to show you how useful SSH tunnels can be and why you might want to use an SSH tunnel over, say, a VPN or vice versa. But before we get to that, it's very germane. I want to thank this segment's sponsor, Untangle. That's right, Untangle is sponsoring this segment on the Linux Action Show, so now we can bring you even more goodies. And thank you to Untangle. Did you know Untangle firewalls work flawlessly once you have them installed, so you can set it and forget it? I love the idea. Picture it. A network full of Windows boxes, protected by a Linux box on the border. That's right, my friends. Go check out Untangle. Thing is Untangle knows that choosing an edge of the network device, that's a big decision and a big commitment. It takes your time, takes your money, takes your resources. You can try Untangle software for free. Just go over to their website, untangle.com. No credit card needed. No commitment to buy. Just download the ISO, load it on your own hardware, and try it out. And by the way, when you're over there, once you've loaded on your own hardware, you decide to like it, use the code LAST20. Take 20% off their services. That's a great deal. Go over to untangle.com, and thank you to Untangle for sponsoring this segment of Slash Etsy. All right. This is very perfect because one of the things you can do with Untangle devices is set up a VPN. And I'll tell you, I think VPNs are great for bridging two networks, A and B, and you have a requirement where you need a persistent connection that is secure over the internet between these two remote locations. Maybe you want to run multiple applications, multiple protocols over this connection. That's where a VPN is great, and oftentimes you do it between two hardware edge devices, like an Untangle device, and boom, Bob's your uncle. You never even have to worry about it. So where do SSH tunnels fit in with this? Well, I can tell you one thing. A lot of people like me, I already have SSH open on my home network because I love and trust SSH. I don't have a VPN appliance set up yet, although I could. But the other thing is SSH tunnels are also a little bit more application specific. Maybe you only need one particular app. You don't need all of the network. This is where SSH tunnels can be a little superior. They're a little more faster, a little quicker, a little more dynamic. And since we already love SSH, we already know SSH, it's really easy to slip right into. Let me give you a perfect example. Two scenarios that come across my plate all the time. Number one. Clients got a bunch of applications on their network that they need me to manage, and when something's broken and they need it fixed right away, an SSH tunnel is perfect. Let's say they have a Postgres database. Well, they're not going to want to expose that Postgres database to the internet. That way their consultant can connect to it from wherever he's at. Of course not. But they will open up an SSH login to their network, and I can log into that SSH server and then use a tunnel to then jump from that machine over to the Postgres server or whatever it is I might want to manage. Let me give you another example, one I use quite often, just recently. It's kind of an oxymoron. Own Cloud. Now, we've talked about Own Cloud before, just did a review. I just did my updates on my OpenSUSE box, and it's improved my performance, but I'm still not quite ready to open up my Own Cloud installation to the web directly, right? I don't want to put that out there. So an SSH tunnel comes to the rescue. I already have SSH up, but let's go through the scenario. Let's say I'm at a client's, or maybe I'm at work, or I'm at school, whatever. Well, here's my Own Cloud box. Look at that. Web page is not available. Oh, Chrome, how you've forsaken me. No, what can it do, right? I haven't put my Own Cloud server on the web. The only way it's accessible is via SSH. Nothing I can do about that, right? No. Why do you even think I'm doing this segment if you think that? Gosh, what's your problem? All right, here we go. So here's my Own Cloud box. This is it up and running on my OpenSUSE machine at home. And I can see it's up, I know it's there, but I just can't get to it from my remote location. Well, friends, I can solve that for you. Let's take a look here at SSH tunnels. So first, fire up your terminal, and then I'll give you the GUI after we get through we're going to eat our veggies, and then I'll give you the dessert. So the GUI is the dessert, but first, you got to man up and eat your veggies. And that includes you too, ladies. Fire up the terminal like I have here, and then get all that crap off there. Jeez, quit looking up my processes, you guys. Bunch of voyeurs. And here's a little secret sauce. I'm going to connect to port 80 on my remote host. Because that is a lower reserved port, I have to do it as root. If you're connecting to something that's up in the upper ranges, that's just a free-for-all. You don't have to do it as root. But because I'm connecting to 80, and I'm opening port 80, I have to do it as root. So let me show this to you, and I'll explain it as I go. So tossing in the sudo there, and I do SSH-N. N tells it not to execute a command on the remote host. Then I put in my remote host. So I'm going to say, I put in the IP here, but you might use something like dynamic DNS maybe to register your home IP, and then you would just put that in there. Now here's the magic. I say open port 80. I'm saying open port 80, right? Open port 80 on my local machine. That's why I'm doing this as root. And bind it to that remote SSH system's port 80. And it could be any port, right? I could open local port 80 and bind it to port 8800 on the remote system. So it doesn't matter. But in this case, I'm doing 8080 on both sides. I hit enter here. It asked me for my password because I did the sudo. And then it asked me for the remote system's password. Put that in. And now I have once you just get no return and it just sits there paused, you're good. Your tunnel is open. So now if I go over here to my Chrome and I hit enter, there's my Own Cloud installation from the remote system through that SSH tunnel. Boom, right? And what's great is you can give it commands where this terminal won't just hang here, so it'll close when it's done. So it will just stay open in the background persistently as long as you leave SSH, the process running. It'll keep it connected. I prefer to leave it running on the terminal. That way I can close the tunnel just by closing the window here. So for example, if I end the tunnel by doing a Control-C, so it closes the SSH process, thus closing the tunnel, and now I go over here, the page no longer loads. So you can see I'm routing through that tunnel, and that's pretty cool. Now, I promised you I'd also give you a little dessert. That's the command line. That command is so simple, and I'll have it in the show notes, but maybe you want to do it in the GUI. I understand. Not all of us love the command line, although really, come on. It's not that bad. But check it out. Now, I'm using the app pick this week, the GNOME SSH, GSTM for short, and I'm going to run it on the command line to execute it because I need to do it as root. So I will run sudo GSTM. But if you're not doing a lower port, you could just run it as a regular user. Sudo GSTM, hit enter, put in my sudo password, which I use my fingerprint for, and here it is. This is SSH Tunnel Manager. Very simple GTK application. You can see I already have an entry, but I'll walk you through this. So you would say add. In this case, I'm going to do properties. You put in the name of the connection. I put in OwnCloud. You put the host you want to connect to. Put the login information. Put the port and put a key in there, which is very nice if you have that. Then you define the port details. So you would say add, and you say it's a local port on 80 on this remote host to this remote port. Super easy, so easy, right? You hit OK, and then hit start, and it turns green right there. Now, you see here in the command line, I can see it's asking me for a password to the remote system because I didn't use a key. So I'll go ahead and put that in now. Another nice side benefit about kicking it out from this command line is you can sometimes see some of that stuff kind of kick out. So I have a green light on my OwnCloud tunnel. Now, if I go open up Chrome and I hit enter, Bob's your uncle. I have established the OwnCloud tunnel. And the SSH tunnel to my own cloud server. And if I go in here and I hit stop and I try to load the page cannot be displayed. So you see there's a GUI way to do it, but honestly, if it's just a one-off thing, I'd say just do it on the command line. If it's a reoccurring thing you need to do quite often, it might be nice to have the keyring what do they call it? SSH Tunnel Manager. GTSM is what, or yeah, GSTM or SSH Tunnel Manager. Either way. Great functionality of SSH. One of my favorite things that SSH can do. It's not just for logins, it's for a lot more. And I'm sure there's other great GUI management applications for tunnels. In fact, I'd love to hear them. Just email linuxactionshow@jupiterbroadcasting.com with your recommended SSH Tunnel Manager, and maybe we'll feature them on a future show. I'd also like to hear about what you might want to see covered in the /Etsy segment. So just let me know at that email address or hit the contact link at the top of the Jupiter Broadcasting website. Back to you guys. All right, Matt. So now we're gonna get a little mean. We're gonna get a little honest. We're gonna get a little brutal. Not mean, just honest.
Well, and I think we're allowed to do so because we live in a Linux world. It's not like we're these Windows pundits that come in and go,
right?
Well, we're actually walking the walk and talking.
We don't have to sit here and pretend like everything's roses when it's not, right? Okay, so this week we're going to tell you about some of the limitations we run into with production under Linux and why a lot of times we still feel that other operating systems have to be used. Now, that's not to say this isn't rapidly changing.
True.
And we're going to cover that towards the end, how we think some of this is sort of going to be self-corrected over the next year or so.
Sure.
Some of it might not, though, and that's what I'm the most concerned about. But I think we got a lot of ground to cover. So
some good insights, yeah.
So before we get started, I want to thank System76. Let me tell you guys, both of us, you're talking to two long-time System76 owners, 7-8 years, and
at least,
always, right, and always been extremely happy. I got a question on Twitter today, and here's a great example of one of the things that I just kind of take for granted. He says, hey, Chris, I'm thinking about buying a Bonobo like you've got. Love my Bonobo. Love it. Best laptop I've ever owned. And he said, but how has the upgrade experience been? Because I know it ships with 12.10, but if I want to try a different distro or I want to go to 13.04, am I going to have a problem?
Right, exactly. What's that going to look like? Sure.
This is the beauty thing. Since the hardware, System76, when they pick hardware that is going to work years out into the road, out in the roadmap. They know because they follow this stuff. They know what's good, what's bad, what's had issues, what works great. And on top of that, if there's anything that ever has a few rough edges, System76 includes a System76 driver, which has a very simple to use GUI front end that just will download from System76 app repository the drivers you need if you have a system that requires that. But let me tell you, it's one of the things you never really have to worry about is hardware compatibility. I love System76. Go over there and tell them the Linux Action Show sent you. Get yourself something nice.
You know, I actually had someone with a question for System76. They approached me on Google+, and I challenge you to find any other the vendors that will do this.
Okay.
He had a question, and I reached out to my contact at System76, and she came in and answered the question in Google Plus directly.
Oh, that's awesome.
He purchased from them.
Yeah,
he was so stoked about it. He was like, "This is great."
This is outside the ad, but they are absolutely just integrated with the community. Their support forums are in the Ubuntu forums.
Yeah.
I mean, that's brilliant right there. They have a great wiki with tons of good information.
So then everybody can benefit from the experiences of other people. It's
Well,
awesome.
I love having System 76 on the show, so go check them out, system76.com. All right. Should we start with the big problem, or should we start with the small problem? Where do you want to start?
Let's start with some of the. Let's start with the big ones. I think that's really the things that are just the elephant in the room. Right?
So here's the thing. Let's start with the thing that I think Linux is not just behind on, but has fallen behind dramatically. So when I started, by the way, so this is kind of an interesting touchstone. Today is my son Dylan's 4-year-old birthday. He's 4 years old today, right? Happy birthday, Dylan. And that also marks 4 years that we've been out in the studio. Because when we were having Dylan, I said, all right, well, I got to get out of the house and I got to build something out there so he can be a loud little baby inside.
Sure.
And when I started sort of transitioning from an audio podcast network to a video podcast network, I knew I wanted to be able to do a lot of things live, and I also knew that I had limited resources in terms of camera operators, all those kinds of, all these kinds of things that you need to do in a live camera.
Various tools, software, sometimes literally a box that does these things for you.
Like the TriCaster is a really well-known one, and I, way outside my budget. And it was one of these things where I needed to sit down and find something that could accomplish it, and I wanted to do it under Linux. I did a lot of looking and a lot of discovery. I didn't really find something under Linux, but what I came across was something called Wirecast from Telestream. Now, what Wirecast does is a lot of really crazy things. If you watch the video versions of this show right now, Matt and I are sitting in front of a green screen.
Yeah. Which is actually just that's all it is. It really is.
And we're able to do camera switching. And what's great about that is while we're doing live chroma keying of the green screen, we are also able to stream that.
That's right.
So
this is all done real time without any delays.
And I can also do things like I can put us in virtual sets. Like it's obviously not set up yet, but hi, see now we're in a virtual set. And look, you can see my screen in the virtual monitor there, right? And it's very cool. Yeah, it cuts your hand off.
It cuts my hand off, of course.
Right. And we also have I could this is a little more for you audio or for you video viewers, but just to kind of remove the curtain one more layer, you can see here we are. This is actually what the shot looks like. This is
crazy, right? Yeah.
And we're able to do all of this in real time while we also record it HD to the hard drive and stream it out to the web. It's pretty intense, and while doing camera switching and while pulling in remote screens. Not only are we pulling in my Bonobo here from HDMI, which is awesome.
Yeah, which is pulling from Linux.
But we're also able to pull in other desktops over the network using software called Desktop Presenter. All they have to do is be either a Mac or Windows and be on the network. It also works under Wine as long as you don't have a composited desktop.
It gets a little touch and go. Yeah.
We're able to use this Wirecast software to do reruns. We're able to use this Wirecast software to display lower thirds. See, there's a lower third that's being generated by the Wirecast software,
That's right?
We're able to do all kinds of crazy things. And on top of that, which is even a bigger deal, is it can do that, and it can also bring in real time different camera sources.
Exactly.
So it can bring in USB camera, it can bring in HDMI cameras, it can bring in FireWire. I mean, this is we're talking really unique stuff, and it's only stuff that's gotten better and better over time. And this is the number one issue I have here is Wirecast was great 4 years ago, but I thought maybe something would come along and replace it.
You would hope so, right? That was kind of the goal, but I think we entered a chicken or the egg situation with it. I think that, for them to branch out into that, they say, well, we need to see more Linux users using our product. Oh, that's right, there isn't one. And so
maybe so. And so what the result, though, is Linux was behind in this area 4 years ago.
Yeah, and they still are.
And the thing is the commercial products have not stood still. They have continued to innovate and get better and better, and Wirecast has gotten better and better. It still has some issues, but it's gotten pretty dang good. And to be able to do all of those things that I just showed you in real time saves so it's actually the single biggest thing that makes the Jupiter Broadcasting Network possible at all.
Right.
Because everything we do runs through that Wirecast machine, every show. And if we didn't have that thing doing these things in real time, these shows would not be financially viable.
Right.
If I had to sit down and green screen these, like we used to do a show called Beer's Tasty.
Yeah, right.
Where we would green screen it in post. And that show was about 15 or 20 minutes long, and we were talking 4 to 6 hours of post-processing.
Whoa.
And that's just to render out the green screen. That doesn't even include the hour or two to dial in the chromo key,
Right.
and then to add like special effects and titles and sounds. None of that's included. It's just 4 to 6 hours just to render the green screen, and we're doing it here in Wirecast in real time right now.
So I think the underlying thing to what you're really saying here is rather than taking on the task of doing it yourself, this box, this equipment, this tool essentially does that for you automatically without you having to worry about it.
I mean, I absolutely look at this as I hate the fact that it runs on Hackintosh. I mean, it really eats at me a lot.
Yeah.
But the reality is, I look at it like a plumber looks at their toolbox.
Sure.
Like, you know, like a logger looks at his axe.
Right.
I mean, I really just see it as a tool to do my job. It's a little fun box over in the corner that just never gets touched, right?
Exactly.
So that's Wirecast, and Wirecast is a pretty obviously, it's the central point of production here. And it's funny because I'm a bit of a Wirecast hipster because a lot of the other podcast networks are now also adopting Wirecast.
Right.
It's blowing up. It's just getting bigger and bigger as it gets better and better. And it also has to do with the fact that Wirecast is really good at a few little essential things that otherwise are very difficult. Live streaming, live transcoding, all that kind of stuff. Okay, so that's Wirecast. Okay. Then you move from Wirecast and you talk about the hardware that comes into Wirecast. In this case, I'm talking about like Blackmagic Intensity Pros. These are like HDMI capture hardware. We're talking they transfer data into your computer at like depending on your codec, maybe 130 megabytes a second.
Right.
It's very high-end transfer stuff, and they don't even build any of this stuff with Linux in mind. Some of it works.
And any of the Linux capturing stuff that you will see out there really isn't there. Not at this level.
Yeah, I mean, some of it will work under Linux, some of it won't to varying degrees. Yeah. Especially like
and it's been explored. It's not like there's something we're not aware of. Trust me, he's put in ridiculous sums of time.
I think like the Intensity Pro is a fantastic PCI Express card, and I think you can get that one working. But the issue is a lot of the new interfaces, things that come over USB 3 and Thunderbolt, are just not working under Linux.
That's
true. And even if you could get them working, what would you use?
What are you going to plug it into?
Yeah, what software are you going to manage them with, right? And then on top of all that, because you're dealing with high definition 1080p video, you're dealing with 130 megabytes a second of data, and you're chromo keying that in real time, and you're streaming it and you're recording. The other major point where Linux falls down on video production, I've mentioned this before on the show, is the codecs. You need something when you're editing video. You need something called an intermediary codec, something that you can record and then move between your different editing programs, your compositor, because you don't want every time you export video out. So, like if I export it out to WebM or OGG Theora,
like I would do in Linux video editors, and
then I moved it into another editor and worked on it, and then exported it again. Every time you're losing quality, right? Codecs like ProRes and Avid DNX HD and Cineform, these allow you to record in as close to lossless as possible. At least the human eye can't see any loss. But number one thing though is no loss in the color space. Right.
So to maybe give you an audio similarity for those that are more familiar with audio, and correct me if I'm wrong with this, it'd be like taking an MP3 and then putting it into FLAC, and then from FLAC back to MP3, and then from MP3 to FLAC. And
you're just losing quality.
It just doesn't make sense unless you stayed FLAC, or wave, or whatever.
Now ProRes is an Apple thing, right? But the atrocious thing about this is there's plenty of other fine codecs out there. Avid makes some, Cineform makes some. They're all Win32 codecs. Or QuickTime codecs. Now, FFmpeg is very diligently adding support for this stuff.
They're catching up.
They're trying. But, there's still, there's tearing in some of these codecs in FFmpeg, so it's not quite there yet. But as FFmpeg adds support, things like OpenShot will get support. And that's going to be awesome. So it's a work in progress there, but it's still at the point where I record here, I need to move that to my editing machine, and I don't want to lose quality between when we shoot this and when I edit it.
Right. No, that makes sense.
And whenever you're encoding something for the internet, you're crunching it way down. So you want to try to get it as high as quality to start with as possible.
Absolutely.
Which brings me to my next point.
Okay.
Video encoding itself it's fine under Linux if you're doing something like ripping a DVD, encoding a home movie, or really even for podcasting. Generally video encoding is fine.
Now, something I was thinking of is now I know a lot of movie studios actually use Linux boxes for rendering. Maybe you can kind of elaborate how that differs. And
well, so a lot of times it's unfortunate they're not using them as front end boxes. They're using them as back end encoders, and
they're using them for CPU cycles. Then,
so here's an example. The same guys that make Wirecast make this program called Episode Encoder. Okay. Now, Episode Encoder lets you do these batch video conversions. So I can say I want, when we do an episode of Linux Action Show, we put out an HD version, a mobile version, a WebM version, and 2 versions of audio, MP3 and OGG. And under Linux, in some scenarios, you use one program to encode a couple of those. You use another program to encode another couple of those, and you manage your different presets and all that stuff in both those programs.
Okay.
Episode's one of these. You drop one source file in, your master file, and it then breaks out all of the versions you need with any of the codecs. Right?
Okay.
The other thing it lets you do is you can go in there and say, okay, well, we have a segment bump at 32 minutes that has a ton of animation, so I really want Encoder to spend some time, episode encoder to spend some time at this chunk in the video to really make sure that comes out crystal clear.
So as it's approaching that, it's ready to self-adjust and actually compensate. Okay.
Right, yeah. And then it also lets you do things like do back-end batch encoding, which you would have running on Linux servers. So it'll do encoding on Linux, but its front end is all Windows or Mac based.
I got you. Okay.
Either. So that's one thing. A little cheaper version, because that's like $500 just to get in. Squared 5's MPEG stream clip is available for Mac and Windows. This is another fantastic encoding utility that will use whatever codecs you have on your system. It does batch encoding. It does multiple files at once. It's very solid, but it's not available for Linux.
Right.
Now, it's not all bad for Linux.
Not all bad.
Handbrake is a fantastic encoder for Linux, and I could use this. In fact, I have for some things. But it's just not quite up to snuff, and it's not quite fast enough.
Yeah, I would say it's really awesome if you have a really fast machine and you're looking at maybe video for small businesses, home use, things like that. I would say it's definitely good for that. Sure.
So this is an issue that I've struggled with on and off for 4 years now, and I've kind of come to the conclusion that I don't think I'm ever really going to necessarily be able to replace all of this, but I look at it as in stages I'll be able to replace pieces. So I think the first thing that's going to get peeled away is because I'm using a QuickTime codec and I'm using all this high-end stuff, I also do then just kind of have to use editors that support that. So that's either Premiere or Final Cut.
Right, that makes sense. I mean, you're already invested in that, sure.
But I think as FFmpeg and OpenShot or Lightworks get better and better, I'm going to be able to move, I think, those files from the Hackintosh onto a Linux box and edit. So in layers, I think I'm going to be able to replace this. So eventually Lightworks or OpenShot will go into editing. And the encoding pipeline, I probably could just sit down and write some FFmpeg bash scripts if I wanted to.
Absolutely.
So I could peel that off. And I definitely can peel off the audio editing. In fact, sometimes I just do, if I'm on a Linux box, the audio shows just get edited there. Yeah. The biggest piece, though, has got to be this Wirecast system. And you and I are sitting here and we're planning our Linux Fest Northwest live
which is going to be interesting. That's going to be interesting.
And we're thinking, we want to do interviews at our booth, and we want to record all of those so we can release some of them in the show.
Right.
We want to live stream the entire damn thing, and we want to do it with maybe 2 cameras, a couple of 3 microphones, a mixer, all that kind of stuff. And we're looking at it as like, man, we have to go to Linux Fest Northwest, and we have to bring a Hackintosh.
Exactly. And just to kind of highlight on that a little more, as some of you may know, I used to work with Patrick on the Webcam Studio project, and so I have some interesting insights on this in saying that truly you guys really probably don't fully understand the challenges that are there trying to do this stuff in Linux, so we really are bound to doing Linux Fest in this environment. Because,
I really feel like I can't convey. It's kind of like when you see an industry from the outside, you kind of think you have it figured out, and then when you sit down and learn it, you're like, oh, this is so much more complex than I realized. That's how video editing is, and like the editor is such a small part of the overall equation.
Oh, yeah.
Because you have everything else that I just tried to illustrate that's around the editor. The editor, at the end of the day, is almost, the video editing software is almost the easiest thing to swap out.
I'd say it truly. I mean, it's basically you're resizing, clipping, and adding transitions.
Yeah,
I mean, really, the rest of it, that's all the
And mainly thanks to Wirecast, because Wirecast is doing so much of this stuff in real time for us. Like, I don't have to go through and post and add this shot in.
Exactly.
Right? If I didn't have Wirecast, I'd have to go find this second in the video, and I'd have to go find this screenshot. I have to go take that screenshot and drop it in the editor. But in Wirecast, Bob's your uncle, I just add it.
Done.
And it's done. The time savings there is unbelievable.
Especially when you're running a number of programs. A number of shows, rather.
And yeah, right? I mean, if I only did one show a week.
I mean, then it would be, you could do it. It's still an amazing time suck.
It's absolutely not impople. Like our buddies over at Linux Gamecast, Ven, he does everything under Linux.
Which is really admirable. I mean, it's really awesome. Yeah.
And I'm always kind of monitoring the software that is released and updates, and I'm always trying it out. But the other thing I have is my technique is also moving ahead over the years, right? So over the last 4 years, I have gotten more refined at making things look a little better, making things sound a little better. And so my requirements and my expectations are also outpacing the actual development that's taking place under Linux as well.
Exactly. Right.
So it's a definite tough spot. However, as technology moves forward, you know, as maybe these types of two guys sitting here at a table in front of microphones doing a video show, maybe that moves into something else, and there's a different type of technology that answers that.
Well, something that OpenShot during their Kickstarter project touched on that really piqued my interest was this idea of a remote box that did all the resource handling for you, and what that type of environment, not necessarily that, but that type of environment might in fact be someday a solution to handle some of these things, to where maybe that technology is then inserted into a remote environment to where you can just set up an account and actually have this type of functionality. Things improve, you know, 10 years down the road.
Are you talking like
almost
a cloud-based, like? So picture this, man.
Yeah, because I'm thinking cloud-based like a box.
Well, look what you can do with Google Hangouts now. You can put lower thirds down there.
Exactly.
What if instead of running a switcher here in the studio, this was just like a little agent software that connected out to remote switching software?
That's kind of what I'm getting at. Yeah, that's what I see happening, because like Google Hangouts is quite frankly the closest we have right now for Linux. It's good. You can get some extensions in there to actually have mixer handling, and I mean there's a really good extensions out there, but they're not trying to navigate while you're doing stuff. You need keyboard shortcuts.
Yeah, or like what I use here is I have a little camera, a little keypad that I use to switch shots with here, and if I could connect that to a Hangout, I actually see this is kind of what my thought is I don't know if I ever see in the current form being able to switch out of the system.
Right.
But as a new paradigm of a new way of doing things comes along, like maybe a hosted switcher, and in a lot of ways it makes sense, because we are right now streaming video.
Exactly.
We're streaming. So if we can take this entire video and stream it live, we could easily send the switching signals to a cloud-based
doing
switcher.
The same thing this is doing now, just not here locally. I mean, it makes sense to me.
And that would probably be powered by a Linux server. And then it would just kick you out a file, and you just drop it in your Linux editor, and Bob's your uncle. Matt, I hope so. I mean,
I really do. You know, I hope so too.
But it's got to be really solid, because video production is one of these things where you can't have it dropping, you can't have it dying on you.
And it would not be free, and it would probably cost a few dimes. There's no question of that. But I think the possibility is there, and I think that's probably what we will see happen at some point on all platforms.
Yeah, and that's one other reason why I always am playing with Google Hangouts and all kinds of stuff. But we'll see where it goes. And if you have things you've tried out there or suggestions, I'd love to hear it. Just email the show, linuxactionshow at jupiterbroadcasting.com, and we'll keep you guys posted, especially as the Lightworks beta hits and that new version of OpenShot from the Kickstarter, which has been funded.
Really excited about that.
So we're going to get to see that, and you absolutely know I'm looking forward to trying that.
Definitely.
Honestly, I hope it's OpenShot. I know you're kind of thinking it's going to be Lightworks.
I hope it's OpenShot too. I just... We'll see.
Yeah,
we'll see how it works out. It may be both.
You never know. So I guess the story is right. I guess for now is stay tuned and see what happens.
To be continued.
All right, Matt. Well, that's the Linux Action Show's look at things that maybe Linux just can't quite do yet. And that brings us to the end of this week's broadcast. But Matt, before we get out of here, what do you say we cover some emails?
Let's get some emails.
All right, Rob G writes in with a first world problem. Matt, let's see if we can't solve it for him. Dear Chris and Matt, great show. Never miss an episode. Because of the time difference, though, it's not practical for me to sit behind the laptop at 10 p.m. The wife starts screaming at me. Whoa, hey-oh, hey.
My wife doesn't mind.
Why don't you just come back down at 10:15 when you wrap up and watch the show? All right.
Yeah. Okay.
So he says instead he watches with Raspberry Pi an XBMC at full screen on Monday. Well, that works too.
That works too. Nicely done.
He says he bought the Bonobo Extreme. Very nice.
Very cool.
It cost me an arm and a leg, but I bought it anyway. Yeah, well, you can max this sucker out.
Yeah,
let me tell
it's
you.
really limitless.
Yeah, I put 16 gigs of RAM in here and 2 SSDs. So let me tell you. But you know what? I don't think I'm going to need to upgrade for years.
No, you're good.
I said, but I just have one problem with it.
Sure.
It's a little bit like a Mac. It just goes and goes. What's the fun with that? I'm getting bored.
Well,
see what I'm saying? First world problem here. It says I started playing with Gen 2 and a VM, but otherwise I would become really depressed. But seriously, you have ever covered proper tweaks for SSDs? I did destroy 2 SSDs a few years ago, and I'm careful not to do this again. I looked for the most commonly used tweaks, but I'm curious what your ideas are. Thanks for keeping it up and spreading the word. He's in the Netherlands.
Boy.
So he jokes, but it really, it is funny. Like sometimes the machine works so well, you got nothing to do.
Exactly. It's just kind of like, okay.
All right, so this SSD thing, people ask us this all the time. And
Right.
as far as I know, there's a few things you can do, like maybe not put your swap on SSD and things like that.
Right.
I don't know a lot of them, so I would like to put a request out there that maybe a thread gets started in the Linux Action Show subreddit on SSD performance tweaks. Like ButterFS, is there something that you can do there?
That you can
Turn
do
on
safely,
trim or
preferably.
something?
Right,
Yeah,
yeah.
safe stuff, yeah.
Nothing
and
too
then
hardcore.
if we get a good collection of those, we'll cover them on a future
Yeah.
show. Christoph writes in, a Mac user lurks. He says, I did it. I bought a Mac. I was gonna switch to Linux and buy a PC for it and
Right.
keep my old iMac, but I guess I just wasn't quite ready to leave my comfort zone.
Okay.
Don't worry, Christoph. We'll be here for you when you are ready. However, I have invested in 16 gigs of RAM and run different distros in VM. I'm quite happy to report that VM Linux runs as fast as smooth on my quad-core i5 as it did natively on my old Core 2 Duo.
Nice.
Now, but here's my point. He says, I don't know if you guys realize this, but Mac users have benefited from Steam for Linux as well. I couldn't help notice that games released for Linux also seem to coincide with the release for Mac.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. He says probably because they have a lot in common.
Yeah, that makes sense.
He said, you should know that a lot of Mac users actually love Linux as well and support and use open source software in OS X. And one more thing, no pun intended. I'm in the process of convincing my wife and my mom to convert to Linux Mint and making positive strides. They use Windows 7 and Vista respectively, so it won't be long before only Windows in our houses are the ones we keep clean. Christoph from Belgium.
Right on, right on.
He says, P.S. As soon as some of the number of available games for Linux hits the 500 mark, he's going to send us some Belgian chocolates.
Oh, hey.
Hey,
Got
yo.
my attention there.
All right, email from JB, who'd be smoking the Linux tux pipe. He says, Chris
Nice.
Lass, I have an idea for your talking points if and when you go to Linux Fast Northwest and you're having trouble with the 2013 is the year of the Linux Penguin talk. I don't, that's not a talk we're having. But
Yeah, I was like,
so he says, so many things have accumulated to make it so. Adoption rate of Android, humble indie bundle success, Steam on Linux, maturity of GNOME 3 and Unity, KDE4, Lightworks, GIMP, Ardour, LibreOffice, and many other programs make it possible to completely run Linux-based OSs without needing Windows to do some tasks, or simply does them better. And I wanted to end on that note right there because I felt like we just got done bashing on some of the things Linux doesn't do right, but it's important to kind of look.
and that was very industry specific too.
Yeah, in that particular area, but it is making so many other strides universally elsewhere that, yeah, there's some areas that still need attention, but if you just snapshot the last 2 years where we have come, Linux
how far it is. I mean, I've lived in a world where the only time I'm running another operating system is in a VM. I mean, for myself personally, just because of my needs. Everything I do is on one distro or another.
Yep.
So we can, in fact, do that, and it's quite doable.
It is actually really good times, and I'm actually really excited about Linux Fest because I think there's going to be a new energy there this year.
Oh, I think so.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's going to be very cool.
It's looking good. So, all right, if you'd like to email the show, just hit that contact link at the top of the Jupiter Broadcasting website, or you can start a thread in our subreddit over at linuxactionshow.reddit.com.
Nice.
Now, one thing we wanted to mention before we get out of here is we got a new Untangled box, and then they've become a sponsor of the
Really
of the Etsy segment, which is awesome. And Matt mentioned to me that they're having a webinar that you guys might
There
want
is
to
a
know about.
webinar coming up. It looks like it's going to be on April 18th at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time.
Yeah.
And you can catch that, and we'll have that details for that in the show notes.
Yep, go check it out, and you get a little overview of what Untangled can do to help you
Yeah.
get control of your network. Matt, what are you up to this week?
As always, you can find me at datamation.com. Scroll down to open source, click into there, and I'm in there all over the place. And of course, you can also find me on Matt Hartley Public on Facebook.
Whoa.
Oh.
We have also links to Twitter and G+
Yes.
profiles for the both of us. Now, the only thing I wanted to mention is don't forget that new Bitcoin show's out. So if you're done watching the Linux Action Show, you now must go over to Jupiter Broadcasting and watch Plan B so you can learn why Bitcoin is pretty cool.
And even if you think you know it all, watch it anyway because you're going to learn some stuff. It's cool.
Here's the math. It's an open source currency. Okay? It's an open source currency. Remember how we like open source operating systems because they're transparent and you can watch the development, you can analyze the marketplace, and you can see new developments as they happen in discussion? Guess what? Bitcoin is an open source currency. Are you getting it? Are you getting it? There's reason to be interested. So go over and check out Plan B and learn a little bit more. All right, everyone. Well, thanks so much for tuning in this week's episode of the Linux Action Show. Come back here next week for our Ubuntu 13.04 review.
Yes.
All right. Now scoot your body over a little bit. The Linux Action Show begins right now. Hey, Matt, would you like to read some emails? It is the Post Jack Bauer Season +1, Episode 6, in 3, 2, already done.